Healing and individuation. Healing does not come in a straight line. It spirals. We think we've moved on, that we've grown beyond a certain wound, only to find ourselves circling back, triggered by a word, a silence, a glance that reopens what we thought was closed. And yet this is not regression, it is deepening. Each return invites us closer to the root. Carl Jung called this journey individuation, the process of becoming whole, of integrating all the fragmented pieces of the psyche into a cohesive self. Not a perfect self, not a happy self, but a whole self, honest, grounded, and real. And strangely enough, it is often through love and the loss of it that this process begins. When someone cracks us open, when their presence touches our deepest longing or our most painful insecurity, they do more than stir the heart. They awaken the soul's curriculum. They force into light the very things we would rather keep buried. The relationship then becomes not just companionship, but confrontation with our pain, our history, our mass, and our truth. To heal, we must first see. And to see, we must be willing to look where it hurts. For many, this is the hardest part. We want to skip the darkness. We want the light, the wisdom, the clarity, but not the descent. Yet Jung reminded us, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. Healing asks that we walk through the fire, not around it. Take Elena, for example. She had spent her entire life seeking approval. As a child, her worth was measured in grades, politeness, and perfection. As a woman, she carried this pattern into every relationship, over-giving, over-apologizing, shrinking so that others could shine. Her partners often praised her kindness, her loyalty, her grace, but deep down she was exhausted. No one knew how angry she really was, how lonely, until she met Isaac. Isaac didn't ask her to shrink. He didn't reward her performance. Instead, he challenged her. When she said, "I'm fine," he asked again. When she avoided conflict, he leaned in, and slowly Elna's mask began to crack. At first, she hated it. "He makes me feel weak," she told her therapist. "I don't know who I am with him." But that was the point. She had never been allowed to be her whole self, only the pleasing version. And now with Isaac, the buried parts, the messy parts, the wild parts, the angry parts began to surface. This is healing, not becoming someone new, but remembering who you were before the world told you to be someone else. Elena's journey was not about the relationship. It was about what the relationship revealed. Isaac was not her savior. He was her mirror. And once she saw what was underneath, she could begin the real work, reclaiming herself. Individuation is not about fixing what is broken. It is about recognizing what has been forgotten. The shadow, the rejected self, holds everything we needed to survive. The rage we couldn't express, the desires we suppressed, the dreams we gave up on. And healing asks that we retrieve these lost parts, not to become reckless, but to become real. This reclamation is sacred, but it is also messy because we have built entire identities on avoidance. We have learned to be polite when we're angry, agreeable when we're hurt, strong when we're crumbling. So when healing begins, it often feels like falling apart. But in truth, we are falling into alignment, into authenticity, into the deeper waters of the soul. It is not always visible. From the outside, healing looks ordinary. A woman walking alone at dusk, a man reading in silence, someone deleting an old message, not out of anger, but peace. These small moments, the boundaries we hold, the truths we speak, the grief we allow, are the real revolutions. And relationships continue to be the crucible. Because nothing exposes your wounds like intimacy, but nothing offers greater opportunity for growth either. When someone sees you, not your persona, not your performance, but you, and stays not to save you, But to know you, something ancient begins to soften. We begin to trust, not just the other, but ourselves. We trust that we can show up fully, that we can be messy and still lovable, that our needs are not too much, that our voice matters. And this trust becomes the foundation for real connection, not the fusion of two half-selves, but the dance of two whole ones. But wholeness does not mean completion. It means capacity, the capacity to hold contradiction, to be strong and soft, to be certain and curious, to be fierce and forgiving, to be fully alive. This is the path of individuation, not toward perfection, but toward presence. Jung often spoke of the archetype of the wounded healer, the one who can guide others because they have walked through their own fire. This is what relationships offer us, not just pleasure or stability, but the chance to become our own healer. Because every conflict is a classroom. Every rupture is a revelation. Every heartbreak is a holy summons. And if we listen closely, if we respond with courage rather than defense, we begin to transform. Not all at once, not neatly, but meaningfully. In this way, healing is not a destination. It is a rhythm. We learn, we forget, we remember again. We hurt, we love, we fall, we rise. And through it all, we become more ourselves, less edited, more honest, more whole. And when we meet someone on this same path, someone who is not afraid of our shadow because they've faced their own, a new kind of intimacy becomes possible, one rooted not in need, but in recognition. You are not my completion, we say. You are my companion. You are not my rescuer. You are my reflection. And in this shared knowing, love becomes liberation. The mirror does not bind us. It frees us. It shows us who we are so that we can walk our path with clarity, not clinging to another, but walking beside them, side by side, soul by soul. This is what Jung dreamed of. Not romantic fantasy, not eternal bliss, but conscious connection where love is not the escape from self, but the embrace of it. And in this embrace, we find the essence of healing, not in being chosen, but in choosing ourselves, not in being perfect, but in being whole. And so the spiral continues, not as a trap, but as a dance, each loop deeper, each turn wiser, each fall a sacred return to the self, to the soul, to the truth. When the right person appears, they rarely arrive how we expect, not with grand declarations or fairy tale timing. Often, they enter quietly in the middle of an ordinary afternoon or during the unraveling of something else. Their presence doesn't dazzle, it grounds. It steadies something inside us that has long been trembling. This is how the right person appears, not to complete us, but to reflect who we've become. Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." And this transformation is not about losing ourselves in love, but rediscovering what it means to be fully seen, without armor, without disguise, without pretense. The right person doesn't make the pain go away. They don't fix us, fill us, or rescue us from our solitude. Instead, they meet us in it. They sit beside the parts we once thought unlovable and say, "I see you, and I'm still here." And that presence, soft, unwavering, is what begins to heal. Not through effort, but resonance. You can feel it, a calm recognition, a slowing of breath. The silence between words becomes a sanctuary instead of a void. You no longer perform, no longer chase. You just are, and that's enough. There is no pressure to be on. No need to explain your depth, your wounds, your wildness. They sense it. They hold it. And in their gaze, you begin to reclaim pieces of yourself you didn't know you had lost. But here's the truth most stories don't tell. Meeting the right person can be terrifying because suddenly all your defenses are called into question. The walls you built to keep pain out begin to tremble under the weight of tenderness. The parts of you that were accustomed to abandonment brace for it. You may even try to sabotage it, pushing them away to see if they'll stay. The right person will not always understand your fear, but they will honor it. They won't demand perfection or constant availability. They will give you space to unfold, to grow in your own time, in your own shape. They know that true intimacy is not about rushing to the center, but about circling closer and closer with care. You begin to speak the language of subtlety, a glance across the room that says, "I'm with you," a hand on your back that steadies your breath, an honest, "I don't know," that feels like truth instead of failure. You realize that connection doesn't always need words. It needs presence. The right person sees not just your beauty, but your becoming. They celebrate your strengths, yes, but also your questions, your uncertainties, your longing to evolve. They are not threatened by your transformation. They are inspired by it. And this becomes the alchemy. Your paths intersect, not to fuse into one, but to walk together more fully into your own. Let's be clear, the right person is not perfect. They will make mistakes. So will you. But even in conflict, something sacred remains intact. A commitment not just to harmony, but to honesty. You learn to repair rather than retreat, to listen not to respond, but to understand. And slowly you shed the armor. You stop hiding your joy, your tears, your opinions. You express what you need, not as a test, but as an offering. Vulnerability becomes a bridge instead of a risk. You stop performing worthiness and start living it. This is the quiet miracle of the right connection. It doesn't ask you to shrink. It doesn't demand you to stay the same. It invites your expansion, your healing, your truth. And yes, it changes how you relate to the world. You no longer crave validation from those who don't see you. You no longer stay in places that cost you your peace. You no longer sacrifice your soul for a temporary sense of belonging, because now you've tasted something real, and it has rewritten your understanding of love. When the right person appears, they don't complete your story. They help you write a truer one, a story where you are the protagonist, not the side character in someone else's dream. A story where your past is not a prison, but a pathway. A story where love is not possession, but permission, the freedom to be all of you. But here's what matters most. The right person doesn't make your life easier. They make it clearer. You still face challenges, fears, doubts, but now you face them with someone who is not afraid of your shadow. Someone who walks beside you when the road bends. Someone who doesn't flinch when you speak your truth. In their presence, you soften, but you do not weaken. You expand, but you do not disappear. You remain yourself, only more alive. And in this space, love becomes what it was always meant to be. Not a cage, not a crutch, but a crucible. A place where truth is sacred, where silence is safe, where two souls stand eye to eye and whisper, "I see you," not for what you offer me, not for who you could become, but for who you are right now in this breath. That is when you know, not by the rush of infatuation, not by the perfection of circumstance, but by the peace in your body, the clarity in your mind, and the echo in your soul that says, "Yes, this is different." And from that point on, everything shifts. Because once you've encountered a connection rooted in truth, in presence, in mutual growth, you cannot unsee it. You cannot settle for less. You carry its imprint everywhere you go. It lives in your nervous system, in your memory, in your dreams. Even if the relationship ends through distance, change, or time, the gift remains. You are not who you were before. You are more whole, more awake, more honest. You know now what's possible. You know what it feels like to be chosen without condition. And perhaps more importantly, you've learned how to choose yourself in that same way. This is the grace of the right person. They do not save you from your path. They illuminate it. And with that light, you keep walking, not behind them, not ahead of them, but beside, towards something neither of you can fully name, but both of you can feel. It is not fate. It is not fantasy. It is the sacred unfolding of two souls willing to meet, truly meet, and grow together. The soul's compass. There comes a time when the path ahead is no longer lit by logic or laid out by the expectations of others. It is guided by something deeper, quieter, something that pulses not in the mind but in the soul. This is the compass we were born with but taught to ignore, the subtle intelligence of the heart, the whisper of inner knowing. It doesn't shout, it doesn't argue, it simply knows. And when we begin to listen to it, truly listen, life begins to realign in ways that defy explanation. Carl Jung believed that every human being is pulled toward wholeness, not perfection, but authenticity. Individuation, he called it, the process of becoming who we truly are, beneath the layers of persona, shadow, and inherited roles. And at the heart of this journey lies the compass of the soul. We spend years chasing things we were never meant to catch. Approval, achievement, attachment. We move through relationships like mirrors, hoping each reflection will give us a clearer sense of who we are. But eventually the seeking turns inward. The gaze shifts. We realize the question was never who will love me. It becomes, who am I when I love myself enough to stop pretending? This is when the compass begins to stir. It doesn't give you all the answers at once. It points. It nudges. Sometimes it leads you into chaos, not to punish you, but to burn away what isn't true. You lose jobs, lovers, identities, not because you're cursed, but because your soul refuses to stay small. You begin to recognize what resonance feels like. A conversation that leaves you lighter. A decision that brings peace, even if it's painful. A person who feels like home, not because they save you, but because they reflect the parts of you that are already whole. The compass does not always lead to comfort, but it always leads to truth. Sometimes it will call you to let go of someone you love, not out of anger, but because you've outgrown a version of yourself that was tethered to them. Sometimes it will ask you to leap without a guarantee, only a deep, aching sense that there's more than this. The mind will protest. It will try to negotiate, to rationalize, to keep you safe. But the soul is not interested in safety. It's interested in freedom. And freedom often means walking alone for a while, sitting in silence, facing the parts of yourself you tried to exile, feeling the grief of old selves dying off, even as new ones begin to breathe. This is sacred work, quiet work, invisible to most. But it is how the soul steers, not through signs in the sky, but sensations in the body, not through maps, but moments. You feel it when you're aligned. There's less resistance, less grasping, more presence, more grace, and that grace spills into your relationships too. You stop demanding others to be your anchor. You stop molding yourself to fit into spaces that dim your fire. You learn to stay when it's real and leave when it isn't, not out of fear, but out of fidelity to your own becoming. The compass does not ask you to be selfish. It asks you to be sovereign, to know the difference between sacrifice and self-betrayal, to discern the line between compromise and collapse, to remember that boundaries are not walls. They are declarations of what you're no longer willing to abandon in yourself. When we follow this compass, our relationships change. We begin to magnetize those who are walking their own path, not perfectly, but earnestly. People who don't just want company, but co-creation. People who challenge us, inspire us, support us, not because they need us to be anything other than what we are, but because they are lit up by our truths. And in these connections, something extraordinary happens. We stop orbiting around others, trying to be chosen. We become the center of our own lives, and we invite others to meet us there. The compass has brought us home. Home is not a place, not even a person. It is a state of alignment, a quiet yes in the body, a life that doesn't require explanation, a relationship that doesn't require shrinking, a purpose that doesn't require proof. This is the miracle of individuation, the revelation that you are never broken, only buried, never unworthy, only unseen, that everything you thought was wrong with you was simply unloved, that the soul never stopped guiding. It was just waiting for you to listen. And when you do, when you truly begin to trust its rhythm, you become unstoppable, not in the eyes of the world, but in your own. You stop living in reaction. You start living in intention. You stop fearing endings. You start honoring beginnings. You stop waiting for signs. You become one. And so the compass carries you forward, not toward a destination, but toward depth, not toward control, but toward connection, not toward having it all figured out, but toward being fully, courageously alive. This is what it means to live from the soul, to let your life become the art of your own becoming, to love as if the purpose of love is not to possess, but to reveal, to walk as if every step is sacred, because it is, to meet others not as masks, but as mirrors, and to remember always that the truest path forward is the one that returns you to yourself. The soul knows the way. All you must do is listen and trust that when you walk in truth, the right people, the right moments, the right transformations will not need to be forced. They will simply find you.